Now jumping back into the action here to go over to part 2 of our weekly game picks. Obviously here in week 11 we already have a winner to start week 11, the Eagles defeating the Commanders just last night. So we're going to get through more of the Sunday games. We went through about half of them yesterday, and now on today's show we're going to get to a couple more here just to see where we stand on these upcoming games, right? Because it will certainly be something to watch as I get it up here for you guys in just a second. There we go. These are the games that we have on here for the remainder of Week 11 on Sunday, the games that we didn't get to. Starting off in the top left-hand corner, the Vikings taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Vikings are trying to get on track here with their offense. You know, the Titans, this is a good week to do it because the Titans, realistically, it's hard for them to really put anything together where it's going to be much different for the remainder of the year. So, you know, they've lost the last 4 of their last 5 games, and Minnesota needs to get back to being efficient on offense because the last 2 games haven't been really up to standard, honestly, for them. They've stalled a lot. They've turned the ball over a ton, or more than really the solid team should. And a lot of it, you know, will fall on the shoulders of Sam Darnold, obviously, as the quarterback. So they got to figure that out. And although Tennessee's defense is solid, I still think Minnesota should not really have too much of a problem to go out there and have a better performance than what we saw against the Colts, you know, specifically in the first half, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, where that game was too close for where each of those two teams are in 2024. It shouldn't have been that close. So I'm really looking for the Vikings to go out there and have one of those complete games, you know, kind of like the Packers game without, obviously, the second half comeback, kind of. So one of those games, at least from the offense, where they put up a good amount of points, they start fast again, and then manage it from there. But, you know, it's funny about these two teams because Minnesota has one of the worst passing defenses, you know, saying all of that, but Tennessee is not really too suited to combat that because they're second to last in the NFL in terms of passing offense. So it's not an area where they necessarily will take advantage of because they haven't been great themselves. So, yeah, I think if you couldn't tell, obviously I'm going with the Vikings because I think their defense will cause the Titans problems. I think Will Levis will turn the ball over, and it should help them. But really, I'm looking at the offense to come alive again for the Vikings. And moving on to the next game here, we have the Raiders traveling to Miami to take on the Dolphins, obviously. And they have similar records, with the Vikings coming in at 2-4 on a 5-game losing streak, though, while Miami just snapped their 3-game losing streak, and they won a big game over the Rams just last week, and they sit at 3-6. Similar records, but very different sensations that we're getting from both of these two teams. And, you know, Miami's defense, I can't say enough about them and how well they played and just how awesome, you know, their performance was to shut down the Rams offense and, you know, get the pressure on Matthew Stafford, make him uncomfortable all night, not really let Kyren Williams get going. And even though they might have given up some yards at certain points of the games, they didn't allow a touchdown in that game either. So I thought that was a great performance from, obviously, their players, but their defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, for coming up with an amazing game plan in this matchup against the Rams. And now with the Raiders coming into town, they're going to start Gardner Minshew again, which he's had some turnover problems, so it should play more into the Dolphins' favor as well. And the Raiders' defense also has allowed the 3rd most points on average per game in the NFL so far, and their offense is one of the worst in the NFL in terms of running the ball, or they're actually the worst team in the NFL when it comes to running the ball. So those two things don't really mix. You know, if you can't really run the ball, it means you're coming off of the field too quickly. Your offense isn't on the field long enough to give that defense a rest, and then once they're tired, the game starts to get away from you a little bit. So with all the track speed that the Dolphins have and how much the Raiders are probably going to be running on defense, even more than usual, I don't think it's a good recipe for the Raiders. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. I think their defense is just going to build on it, and Gardner Minshew may struggle yet again in this game with the Raiders. So now we move on to the third game, and this one's a bit more of a challenge to decide, because both of these teams, one, are coming off of pretty bad losses. You know, the Broncos must be feeling pretty sick about losing to the Chiefs and potentially giving them their first loss, and the way that they lost that game was pretty disheartening, if I'm being honest. They should have won that game, but, you know, I guess the moral victory for some people was the fact that they were close. If you accept moral victories, I'm sure the Broncos don't, and Sean Payton doesn't, but, I mean, it is what it is now. And, you know, talking about bad losses, the Falcons just lost to the Saints for a couple of their own mistakes, but, you know, the Saints also had to do a lot to even win by 3 points. So it's two teams that I think are better than the record might say. Definitely the Falcons on offense, but their defense is a little bit hit or miss. And the Broncos, same thing. They're on the other side, though. Their defense is very good, but their offense is also a bit hit or miss with a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. But, you know, the Falcons will face the Broncos, obviously. One of the best defenses in the NFL, just allowing 17.7 points per game. Fantastic for them. And even though the Broncos offense is a little bit hit or miss, still it has looked better. It's growing along with Bo Nix as well as we go through the season. So that's great to see. And it'll really come down to Atlanta's defense. Can they play better? Can they outplay a growing, a improving Broncos offense? You know, they're in direct competition with one another, right? The Falcons are going to quite literally have to stop the Broncos offense. The Falcons defense has to step up, and those two parts of the ball are the most questionable for these teams, and they're in direct competition with one another. So that'll be really the determining point in this game. And to that point, I think Atlanta just has enough to edge out the Broncos here. I think Pat Surtain is going to be probably all over Drake London. Pause. He's gonna be blanketing him pretty much the entire game. So with that being the case, though, don't sleep on Darnell Mooney. I've been sleeping on him, but he has really stepped up over the last couple weeks. So he's been doing great. I think he's going to step up again and have a great performance, and the Falcons will just edge out here the Broncos in Week 11. Then we move on to the other side of the picture here. We have a divisional game, the second game between the Seahawks and the 49ers this year. Seahawks coming off of their bye week, trying to get things clicking once again after hitting a rough spot before their bye week, and the 49ers come into this game a week after Christian McCaffrey finally makes his season debut down in Tampa, and this will be the first home game that Christian McCaffrey will play in. And yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing, because in his return, we mentioned how not only was it, you know, just significant just having him out there, but for Brock Purdy, I think it gives him such an easier read to make out there on a crucial third down or on a crucial point in the game where they've stalled a little bit. Just looking out for McCaffrey as an outlet in the passing game or the running game, I think is huge for Brock, especially not having Brandon Ayuk, obviously, and maybe Juwan and Debo or Kittle aren't necessarily, you know, getting open as frequently. It's always easier to find Christian McCaffrey. So I think that's going to be a huge help for them. And if you guys remember in the first matchup, it was pretty high scoring, and the Seahawks had a chance, but there was some crucial turnovers that they made and crucial, you know, bad decisions that hurt them in this game. So I think now, and even just going forward, I want to see the Seahawks, you know, get away from that and be a lot safer with the football. But I think, you know, Christian McCaffrey, his home debut this year, everyone's going to go crazy, wanting to see him score, wanting to see him do great. So I think it's too good to go against the 49ers. They're looking a little bit more like the 49ers. Ricky Pearsall had a nice game. Juwan Jennings is growing into a great player. So I'm going to go with the 49ers here. I think they start to figure things out, starting with the Seahawks. Then, arguably, the biggest game, other than probably Pittsburgh and Baltimore, the Chiefs travel to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills. The first overall seed could be wrapped up with how this game turns out, and I'm being serious, because the Chiefs, after this, they don't have too many hard games honestly, I think the only really tough one is probably Pittsburgh and Houston, but both of those teams don't really fill me with the utmost confidence that they're going to just defeat the Chiefs just based on what we've seen from them. So in this game, it's going to be huge because Buffalo at home, I think they play better, and they're also coming off of, a little win streak here, but they are dealing with some injuries. Keon Coleman's already out. Dalton Kincaid, he didn't practice the last 2 days, so I'm not quite sure how much we will see of him or if he is going to be ruled out for Sunday. But they do expect Amari Cooper to come back, which is obviously huge at this point considering the other two. And, a win for Kansas City would put them 3 games ahead of Buffalo and Baltimore, who I think a lot of people have as the next best team, with 2 head-to-head victories over both of those 2 teams. So that's why, it sort of re-emphasizes why I think the first overall seed will be wrapped up, because those 2 teams are probably the closest ones, and, the 2 tiebreakers go in favor of the Chiefs. So the Bills really need this win if they want to have any hope of getting the number 1 seed and that bye week. It's going to be huge. But another piece of news that for the Chiefs is that their kicker, Harrison Butker, was placed on the IR. He is going to need knee surgery. I think it's an MCL injury, if I'm not mistaken. And, a kicker, you might be thinking, like, who cares? But Harrison Butker, has been huge for them over the last few weeks in these tight games. You need a reliable guy like that. So it could affect some of the decisions potentially on 4th down or a long field goal, maybe missing a couple if the backup just doesn't have it. Obviously, compared to Harrison Butker, it's not going to be the same. So that's something else to look out for. But I want to say the Bills. I think the Bills are capable, of being a good team, and with Josh Allen, anything's possible, right? But I can't bet against Patrick until I see somebody beat him. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I've seen, and I bet against Patrick too. I have been in favor of the other teams, thinking that this is their chance to win. But of course, Patrick Mahomes does always pull something out of where, and just they win games. They know how to win games. That's all they care about is winning games. They don't care how they do it, how it looks. Do you agree with it? It doesn't matter to them. And I think the Bills are a good team. I would like to see them win just to make it a little bit more interesting, but I think it's going to be Kansas City. Until I see someone beat them, and I guess convincingly, I'm not going to bet against them. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs here. And the last game on Sunday Night Football, we have the Bengals and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers, with the top-ranked defense in the NFL, is facing their greatest challenge with a top-ranked offense in the Cincinnati Bengals, with Joe Burrow playing at an MVP level. Jamar Chase on the verge, kind of flirting with the Triple Crown, if you will. So this will definitely be their biggest challenge. And, I think Los Angeles is a good team. I think they will make the playoffs. But, their schedule hasn't been too challenging in the minds of a lot of people, and for me as well, because the toughest teams they've played have been Pittsburgh, Arizona, and Kansas City, and they've lost to all of them. And also the Broncos, I guess you could throw in there as a decent team, but they did beat them. But overall, they've lost to more of the good teams than have beaten them. And I'm not saying the Bengals are in that group because of their record, obviously. I don't care how good their offense is playing or how good Joe Burrow's playing. If their record is what it is, it's a whole team thing. The team itself isn't that good. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be their biggest test. They're at home, so they should be a little bit more favored. But it is huge just because both of these 2 teams are competing for a final playoff spot. So it'll be, a win would mean that it helps your case out a lot more, but also directly affects negatively the other team that's trying to sneak into the playoffs. So this game is huge, but because I feel like the urgency is more in the favor of the Bengals, I'm going to go with them. I just feel like they could outscore the Chargers, quite honestly. So I'm going to go with them. They definitely need it a lot more. So I think the Bills will win this game. And that's all the games we have here in Week 11. There's going to be a lot of entertaining games. I'm sure a lot of high scoring, close games, high-stake games that we have here in Week 11. So make sure to check out as many games as you can. I assure you guys, you're not going to want to miss a lot of this action that we're going to have over the weekend. But we do have a couple more topics to get to. We're going to continue to talk about Deion Sanders. We mentioned him yesterday in regards to his son getting drafted. But could Deion tag along and also be drafted along with his son to whatever team ends up getting Shedeur Sanders? I'll explain what I mean by that and the rumors swirling around Deion and the NFL after our next break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.